Hello, good morning, and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Maryfran Johnson, your host for the show. Twice a month, we produce this video show and podcast with the generous support of my editorial friends and colleagues at CIO.com and the CIO Executive Council. We're streaming live to you right now on LinkedIn and on YouTube on our CIO channel there. And we welcome all of our alert viewers and participants today to join in this conversation and send us questions of your own for my guest. Our editors are going to be watching the chat on both LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll be happy to pass those questions along. And the questions would be aimed at, my guest today is CIO Katrina Agusti of Carhartt Incorporated. In April of 2022, Katrina was promoted to CIO after nearly 20 years with the company's technology operation. Now, as the leader of all things technological, she is tasked with creating an environment where technology and a digital mindset can continue to play a more integral role in the future of the company culture and the brand recognition in the market of Carhartt. She reports directly to the president and the COO. Most of you may know what Carhartt is. Founded in 1889 in Detroit, Carhartt is a retail brand that has been long known for its durable, long-lasting work clothes. And it was originally designed for manual laborers such as railroad and construction workers and farmers. Today, this is a $2 billion retailer employing 5,400 people, and it remains a family-owned private company that is run by the descendants of the founder, Hamilton Carhartt. Expanding beyond its blue-collar workwear roots, Carhartt apparel has now become fashionable streetwear for younger generations thanks to its works-in-progress line, which I'll be talking about with their CIO. Now, before stepping into her current role, Katrina held several leadership roles in the IT department and organization at Carhartt. Most recently, she was the Vice President of Solutions Delivery, where she was leading the company's IT application roadmap and all of technology support for Carhartt Mexico. Katrina, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Maryfran.
Well, I'd love to start with the big picture impact of these last 2 years. You are almost a year and a half into your very first CIO role, but you are a company veteran. You have been with the brand for 20 years, so you know it inside and out at this point. So retail analysts have really been raving about Carhartt apparel having its moment, like the authenticity of the brand, the surging popularity of it, trending in the UK especially, as well as in the US. So tell us about the customers, about the DNA of the brand, and how what you're doing in technology is playing into that moving into the future.
Absolutely. So thanks for the question. We definitely see a lot of brand heat at Carhartt, but what we do is stay true to who we are, right? We are rooted in workwear. As you mentioned, that is our brand purpose, is to deliver those rugged and durable products to our end consumers. So, through the years, we've had a lot of moments in time where we, from a technology perspective, have been able to meet the consumers where they are, provide access to the brand, engagement with the brand, and those types of things. But we're very fortunate to have a brand that stands on its own, and it has such a legacy where people just feel an inherent loyalty and dedication to the brand. So it's been a great opportunity to be part of the brand and its double-digit growth over the last several years.
Yeah, well, double-digit growth is really something to, if not outright brag about today, it's certainly worth noting. Talk about when we were getting ready for this interview today, you were talking about the segmentation of the brand, and you mentioned the next generation doers, people out there. So this is part of the growth area for Carhartt. I mean, there's always going to be those tried and true customers. Tell us about that segment of the brand.
Yeah, so we really tailor who we speak to three primary consumer segments. As you mentioned, first is the tried and true, which is our brand loyalists, our blue collar workers, and the emerging area is what we call our next gen doers. So these are folks, especially through the pandemic, who started to get into either trades or do it yourself type of home projects, and a lot of people started to kind of get back to those types of projects, but also back to the land, right? People started raising chickens and getting into a lot of the different components of really our core consumer purpose. So it was great to see that next generation start to pick up the brand and see the value in its function. And then lastly, we have our active outdoor enthusiasts, which again are, those folks that are starting to, as travel was shut down, they started to visit national parks and started to get more in touch with nature and hiking and those types of things. So, it was a great moment for us to show the functionality of the brand and to introduce it to other consumer segments that may or may not have been aware of the Carhartt brand.
Yeah. Well, and I know we're going to probably talk about this more as we get into your digital strategy, but one of the things you had mentioned was building out a Friends of Carhartt brand. Yes. Is that a marketing campaign? Is that something that IT gets involved in?
Absolutely. So we definitely try to use our social channels and connect with individuals that can help amplify our brand. So that's exactly right. We partner with various Friends of Carhartt that are living through their purpose of do-it-yourself work or farming or ag, and we go to them and ask them to speak on behalf of the brand related to their function and how they use our product. So that they, we're creating additional audiences and additional ways to connect with the end consumer. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're here for.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, and last question I have about consumers. I noticed behind you on the wall, for those who are watching, it looks like those are testimonials written by people. Is this one of your demonstration areas at Carhartt? Tell us what that is.
Yeah, so this is called the Story Room, and we get a lot of fan mail, if you will, to our executive team about how much they love the Carhartt brand, how it's been passed down through generations, how it's potentially saved their life or saved their limbs because they've had a machinery accident or something where the garment actually held up in that scenario. We've had people get married, whole wedding parties decked out in the Carhartt brand. So it's just so inspiring as you can imagine, to see folks and how just emotionally connected they are to our product.
Yes.
It's so phenomenal. So yeah, we like to celebrate and share when we hear testimonials and feedback from our consumers because that's what energizes us.
Yes. Well, and I think at one point I'd asked you 20 years with the same company. This is one of the things you have enjoyed about it so much is just, the good feeling of the brand.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's as you mentioned, it's fifth generation family owned. You'd feel that through that culture and you feel that through the product and the authenticity of how we continue to maintain that brand DNA as we evolve our product and innovate our product to meet today's needs.
Yes. Well, and one of the things that I especially enjoy as I talked with CIOs these days is sometimes it's so easy we could spend half of our time talking about their brands because CIOs are at such a strategic level with all of that now, and it's just particularly fun. You don't run into any heads of IT that are not so deep into the brand strategy that they couldn't just hold forth on it quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at our strategies, we see, it's probably 80% driven through digital initiatives that are, continuing to enable and, activate our strategies. So I have the privilege of, to your point, having a seat at the table to influence that strategy and at the end of the day, enable it through the delivery of our technology solutions.
Okay. Next question. What were your marching orders when you came into this role? You were part of the succession plan of the former CIO and a longtime mentor of yours, John Hill, who actually was on this show back in June of 2018. So I know that he's moved on to another company now where he's a chief digital officer. But coming into it, you were obviously not just expected to keep doing what John was doing. So what were the marching orders? What did the board and your C-suite expect from you?
Yeah, great question. So we had just gotten through a significant amount of foundational transformation projects. So we had been through moving about 95% of our compute from on-premise to the cloud. We shifted to a new commerce platform. We upgraded our ERP backend. So there were a lot of projects that are foundational, but are not as consumer or customer facing when it relates to how easy it is to do business with Carhartt. So really my first marching orders were 100% aligned with our strategy, which is what digital projects can we do to amplify the brand? So that's around driving awareness, driving engagement, and of course, as I mentioned, and we can talk about a little bit more, getting our women's strategy off the ground and more operationalized at scale. Then we had just anything around the experience. So as I mentioned, those previous projects, they're very back-end focused, and a lot of the end users, whether they be internal or external, don't see the value of those types of projects as they would if we're making their lives easier, automating, or providing, less friction, less steps. So really getting focused on the experience elements of our technology solutions. And then finally, there's just a foundational element, right? So do we have the talent strategy for our associates? How are our associates at scale managing through digital change? So you had mentioned at the beginning, how do we shift to a digital mindset so that we are getting the most value out of our solutions? And then, of course, starting to support some of these emerging areas around sustainability and circularity in fashion, in the fashion industry, and some of the community and DEI efforts. So again, hand in hand from a marching orders perspective with our strategies, but then, of course, how can we get better internally as an IT operation and continue to mature and level up as we scale? Okay. So those were the focus areas.
And it's not just one, is it? It's like multiple.
No.
But of course, you would expect that, right, as a CIO. Tell us an example, tell us a story around something that you've been able to accomplish, your team has accomplished in the last year that speaks to that mission of greater digital enablement that improves the customer experience, because that out-facing external look at customers and how they're working with the company, what they're perceiving about the brand, all of that, of course, has technology underlying it. So tell us about something in the last year that particularly showcases that.
Yeah. So we set out, as we continued to mature just our operating model at the enterprise level, to really mature our sales, inventory, and operational planning processes, but also our sales, operation, and execution processes. And one of the primary focuses on that was, how can we get the data that we need in an actionable format to drive root cause analysis and solve for things that are inhibiting us to deliver the best service levels and deliver on our promise to our consumers. So we set out on driving really the definition, identification of those metrics, and of course, serving those up to the business in a way that they could digest that, because as you can imagine, there's various levels of detail that go into that, so that they can start actioning. And as a result of that, we were able to improve our what we call our on time and in full rates, we're able to improve our overall customer and consumer service levels. So how quickly we can fulfill orders, those types of things. So it's really helped us dial into, instead of having anecdotal type of reasons why we thought things weren't going well, the data allowed us to tell the story and to really get after some of those areas of improvement.
Okay, great. Well, and I know that when we talked earlier, you report to the COO, but you're also very tightly aligned with the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and privately held, financially in great shape. So I'm thinking on my end, that must be wonderful. You come into the role and you have an open checkbook to do whatever you need. How does that work when you've got, I think a lot of times, especially in public companies, the CIOs often think that when they're family owned and privately held, the sky's the limit and whatever you need, and it's not necessarily that way. So how does the budget things how do you manage all of that? And have you ever had an open checkbook? I love that idea,
I wouldn't say, we've had an open checkbook, but what I will say is Carhartt understands the value proposition of technology and that it is table stakes in today's environment. So we have never, even in times of, macroeconomic headwinds, stopped investing in technology, right? So there might be conversations of priority or sequencing, and a lot of times that's more driven not necessarily financially, but just organizational readiness, organizational resourcing, change management. Everybody's clamoring to get a lot of these digital transformation initiatives off the ground, but there's a change fatigue aspect to that. So how much can the organization actually successfully implement? So we've been very lucky as an IT organization, and Carhartt, at large, in that they've always prioritized technology investments. And I feel like we've had a good pace to go alongside our growth path in those investments.
Well, and because I noticed when that you've had one of those big foundational elements was moving a great big ERP system online. And I was thinking, when you talk about change fatigue, every CIO I've ever interviewed about that says, I wish we had spent a few more months getting everybody ready for it. Where are you in that process? Is that project essentially, or that effort, that initiative, is it up and running now, or is there still a lot to do?
So all of those foundational elements are up and running. We still have, from a move to the cloud, we're probably about 5% still on-prem of compute. And that's just due to timing to move some of those applications off. Our ERP is now global on a standard template across all of our business units, which is huge.
Congratulations. Yep.
Yes. And we do have our the new commerce platform running for our US website, and we're in the middle of migrating for our European and our what we call Carhartt Company Gear, but it's basically direct to business for small companies. So we still have 2 more migrations on sites, but the behemoth in the room, which was the SAP implementation for ERP, is behind us.
That's good.
And that was
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was definitely the source of the most fatigue.
Yes. And you can proudly say, and everybody's still standing, because that is often the biggest deal that CIOs will have to deal with. And you've gotten that under your belt very early in your CIO career, so that's even better, right?
Absolutely.
When I always ask this with a certain amount of trepidation, because the digital transformation has become such a big buzzword. It doesn't mean anything freestanding the way, like words like innovation and, strategy. It could be anything. So when you think about what Carhartt's digital business models are about, what has changed there, and what is changing going forward? As I'm sure that if we were to ask, what does being a digital business mean to everybody on your C-suite, for instance, they would probably have different takes on it. So give us your take as the CIO on what the digital business is for Carhartt and how it's moving forward. You'd mentioned that you're very focused on a future state right now. So you've got a direction you're heading. Talk about that.
Yeah, so definitely we are in varying levels of maturity across the different functions in the business. I would say as we look at digitizing all of the functions within our business, the most mature area is anything that is consumer facing. So that would be our websites. They have the most maturity as far as capabilities, competencies, workforce plans, those types of things. There are other areas in the business that from a prioritization perspective, we just haven't built that muscle and that kind of product line ownership where you would have necessarily a product owner in the business that had a counterpart in IT, and you're looking at it as an end-to-end platform versus looking at, implementing individual applications. So we're on that journey. We're hoping to get a lot more focus on those partnerships versus, and I'm sure you hear that a lot, right, as moving away from order takers to more business consultancy, but also with our business partners having skin in the game and accountability and ownership around the outcomes that we're trying to drive for the organization. So again, it varies by function as far as maturity, and we're definitely continuing on that journey. And a lot of the ways that we're trying to enable that is through that organizational design and addressing some of the capability and competency gaps that we have today so that we can accelerate some of those digital projects in different areas of the business.
Okay, good. And we have actually our first question from our very alert and watching audience. We thank you for this. And it's a good question that plays right into what we're talking about. How do you prioritize your digital initiatives? Do you use any particular tool like a prioritization matrix or so forth to rank the initiatives and decide which ones to focus on first? That sounds like a governance question to me. And I know we love governance. Question. Yeah.
That's a fantastic question. No, there is no tool today.
Doesn't exist.
Well, it might exist, but again, we're in the very early stages of maturity when it comes to a repeatable process and governance around how we make those decisions. Today, it's a very small committee that evaluates the overall portfolio based on, the business case that we were intaking. What is the connection to the overall strategic objectives that is driving? What priority do we put on those objectives themselves? And then, of course, there's other elements related to, the investment, the resource needs, the business readiness. So there's a lot of criteria we kind of run through to figure out how we can best slot and prioritize. But I would say the number one thing that's driving it is the connection and how it will drive the strategy.
Okay, and by the connection, you mean like the customer experience connection?
You got it. Yeah, okay. It's enabling a pillar of our strategy.
Okay, excellent. Let me see. And we have another question pending. This is so perfect because we were going to talk about this too. What is the strategy for using AI generative Gen AI in supply chain? So this I know. Well, this pivots us into that whole Gen AI discussion, which honestly, every CIO I talk to for months now has been kicking the tires on something. So let's talk about Gen AI at Carhartt and how you're approaching it and what you're looking for, especially from your supplier vendor partners in terms of how they get involved with the strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're not using anything related to Gen AI or large language models at scale in a productive environment yet.
Very few are really. Yeah.
Right. But of course, we do have other elements of AI that we're using. We have obviously robotics heavily in our distribution center. We have we're using predictive modeling, for example, in inventory optimization and personalization. We're using natural language processing for consumer sentiment and those types of things. On the AI, Gen AI large language model, our approach is currently, again, because we're still trying to navigate the governance and data protection and different things like that, is we're providing safe environments for people to experiment. So, for example, Microsoft has Bing for Enterprise that will allow you to access that data, but not have that data ingested back. So there are different tactics that we're trying to provide, if you will, sandboxes or playgrounds where they can experiment with the technology, but we're still protecting that data. So we're in the midst of that. We're also, to your point around partnerships, we do see that Microsoft will be probably our primary partner related, because a lot of the work that we're doing has to do with our internal data. So a lot of our data products in that space are Microsoft products, and they have about 16 different co-pilots right now that they have in general availability. Wow. So we're starting to evaluate that around, they have a lot of productivity tools and different things that you can take out of the box to run, for example, large language models against your data versus the wide world of internet. So again, we're still in the very early stages, and a lot of the energy is around the education, policy development, security, and really connecting it to what the business value is. What are the possible use cases that can be relevant and that we could quickly productionalize. So our intent is to create a pipeline. We're actually going to do a hackathon in the second half of our fiscal year to really start to experience or experiment alongside of our business partners, because that's the other piece of just, there's some skepticism, there might be some, resistance, but then there's other folks that are just like, I'm going full bore. It's writing speeches for me. It's doing product content. So, we're trying to create some guardrails, but we definitely don't want to inhibit any type of innovation or optimization that can be done in a safe way.
Yeah. Well, because we talked about that it's now so old school to have any problem with, we used to call it rogue IT or shadow IT. And this is now the era of encouraging the shadow and encouraging the rogue, and then partnering with the parts of the business that want to play around with these things. I'm making the assumption that the business elements that would be most interested in GenAI are usually in marketing and communications end of the company. Am I wrong about that? Is it different at Carhartt?
No, you're right about that, but there still is just general intrigue and wondering what it could do for them from an optimization perspective.
Right.
Also, I think, again, it goes back to the education of there's AI, and GenAI is under that umbrella as a large language model. So people don't necessarily always understand, and they don't necessarily have to, is, there are other elements of artificial intelligence, whether it's robotics or, predictive modeling, those types of things. So again, just making sure that people understand the different types of technology, what are the pros and cons of those, and what are the best applications based on the problem that they're trying to answer or the business case they're trying to enable.
What is the approach you're taking to kind of both answer those questions from the business, but also get a little bit ahead of it? And by doing more of, you don't want to just outright call it educating the business, because that sounds like, that usually gets people's backs up. They're like, oh, you're going to educate me. No, but in terms of making sure that you're bringing up as many topics as they're asking questions, is that what you'll do at this upcoming hackathon, or do you have other ways that you approach that?
So we had started early on socializing with senior leadership about what our approach was, right? Because the second it got flooded into kind of industry articles or different things, we knew that, to your point, we better get ahead of this. Otherwise, it's going to get legs pretty quickly. So we started with senior leadership team. We are going to continue to do road shows. We're going to build it into some of our education related to like security and compliance, data privacy strategies for that element. But as far as bringing them along in the journey, we have a lot of projects that are already in the portfolio that could have use cases that have an element of AI to it. So we'll do that naturally and organically there. And then absolutely, to your point on the hackathon, all of our hackathons or innovation days include our business partners, right? Because we want them to be part of that process and understand how these things come to life and some of those technologies. So to your point, those things are converging, and given the scale of digital, it's very difficult to just try to control
right.
every element. It's more about how can we protect and provide the most information so that they make the right decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine in the next half a decade, probably, the word digital will just come to mean technology. It's like in fact, do you refer to, is IT still called IT at Carhartt, or have you given it a fancier name?
It is still IT. However, we're starting to provide some words around what does IT mean. So we're actively building our maturity up in the technology space. Mm-hmm. So we've defined that in more digital terms.
Good.
So it is starting to take that shape just through those those efforts.
Well, I remember, and this would be a couple of years ago, I was talking with the CIO, and we were talking about talent retention, like your best people. And this particular CIO told me that he had found that with 2 or 3 key people, he just had to change their titles and include the word digital. And the minute he did that, they were like, all right, they're happier with what they're doing. They felt like their own marketability probably was really up.
Sure.
But I thought you had mentioned an org redesign essentially that is going on now. Is that just happening in the technology organization? What can you tell us about that?
Sure. So we had, probably a couple years back, we had an organizational and enterprise level effort called Fit for the New Frontier. And it was just an opportunity for us to kind of reset and evaluate just the talent across the board. So that's been going on for quite some time. But IT specifically, as a support function, we were one of the last ones to kind of go through an individual function organizational redesign. So that started probably about six weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And it's really to align on a lot of the things we talked about as far as our marching orders, is to best enable, some of these different emerging skill sets, better optimize the overall IT function, and then of course really bring home the best way to drive business partnerships. So how we're organized against, the lines of business, and what that partnership looks like to drive the most value for the organization. So we did a great job of kind of going out and hearing the voice of our business, consumer, customer, and now we're answering those opportunities through the organizational design.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. We do have another question, which actually harks back to what we were talking about, your ERP implementation. And this is really, I think it's more backward looking for you. What would be the first step to consider in a global ERP implementation? And I think you've been there, done that already, right?
I have.
Do you remember what the first step was?
Yeah. Yes. Honestly, I would say just evaluating the readiness of the organization and making sure that you might have to break the work down. So depending on, what your line of business is, how you're organized, what the complexity is, what the regionality is. The first thing we did was, okay, how are we going to break down the work? And we did. We ended up doing wholesale. We did retail, wholesale, then our European group. Okay. And again, just assessing that business readiness. Can we dedicate the resources to do it in the right way? Okay,
good. And then another question pending from our audience, and this one is, could you provide one specific example of a GenAI app that has yielded an ROI? And I know. I asked that thinking that most everybody I know would say not yet, but maybe there's something I didn't ask you about. You got anything?
No, not yet. Like I have heard people use it as an accelerator, right? So instead of starting with a blank sheet of paper, it just helps accelerate the work, whether it's, product detail descriptions or, I'm creating a speech for the sales meeting and here are the points I want to get across.
Yeah.
So those are the types of ad hoc things, but not at scale, not to have a hindsight of really the value that it added at this point.
Yeah, there's nothing that would get your CFO's heart going pitter-pat. In terms Exactly. Now, we have another question, too, and this is because you'd mentioned Microsoft co-piloting, doing those co-pilots. Yes. In which business processes will the Microsoft co-pilots be used first or most likely? And if you can answer that, it is a good question.
Yeah, I think we're going to start, honestly, with the productivity space because we can contain it to our internal business processes, just so that we can try it out. And then, we would continue to expand our foray. And, it might not end up being always Microsoft. We're going to partner with them to learn for our own internal development. But what we can see already, and we're hearing it from SAP with its partnership with IBM, you see Salesforce, they're spinning up, their Einstein AI with partnerships and various things. So I think Adobe, all of these large scale leaders in the technology space are going to start building into their platform. Now, whether they decide to monetize that as a separate thing, that's TBD. But I think just by its nature, some of those will come into the other business lines of business through the platforms that we already have deployed in those spaces.
Okay, great. Now, and of course, I'm going to try to get in a few of my own questions now. The audience has been doing an absolutely great job, and we really encourage more of that to come. But we've been talking a lot about what IT is doing, and I never got to fit in that question about the size and scope of your IT department. It sounds like the kind of things you're taking on, you've got thousands of people working in IT, but you do not.
No. So we have about 215 people in our IT organization. The different pillars, if you will, and how we're organized. We have a team that leads our business applications. So that's really product line delivery, support, and maintenance.
Yes.
We have a team that focuses on data and analytics. So that includes master data, business intelligence, those types of things. And then we have a technology team that is really focused on infrastructure, service desk, digital workspace, so all of the hardware, those types of things, and also our security and compliance.
Okay.
So it's probably three primary right now, again, subject to change in our current org design. And then we do have a team in Querétaro, Mexico. It's our shared service center that allows us to extend our global team through additional headcount in that space. So we have about 60 folks of that 215 that are sitting in that facility. And we also have remote folks that support our individual facilities, whether it's our manufacturing, our distribution, our European subsidiaries. So definitely a mix of regionality and different roles. Yeah. We also, from a partner perspective, we do have a few folks that are that we're partnered with to do different types of operations. But we're really trying to insource a lot of those functions back in, just for, to continue to cross train. We're moving more towards platform engineering, ops, having DevOps, those types of things. So we're trying to bring some of that where we weren't ready to take on the full, experience and upskilling. Now we were starting to have some bandwidth to do that.
Good.
And then we'll staff aug periodically ad hoc for, projects specific. But again, really trying to give those opportunities to our internal resources.
That's great. I always love to hear that some or even substantial insourcing is going on, because you're building up, and it does so much more than just build up tech capabilities inside the company. Absolutely. It gives more career paths forward in the IT organization, which I'm sure that's not lost on you. I know that the company tends to attract, you're in, a lot of it is in Michigan, and of course you've got a place in Mexico, but are there talent areas where you have a lot of trouble recruiting, or, often I hear data engineering, but I like to ask that, what are you most looking for right now?
So we, given the change in market a year ago, I would have said, hey, same thing, data, security,
Yep.
these types of roles. Even to some degree, we were having trouble getting SAP functional folks. So we were struggling in certain areas. Now the market is different today and seems to be a little bit more open. Plus, I'm sure like many during the pandemic, we opened up the marketplace to be most of our positions are remote. Exactly. So it has created obviously a much broader pool than we had experienced before. So I would say it's less about getting the talent in and more about retaining the talent we have and reskilling and upskilling based on some of these modern technologies that we've taken on.
Yeah. Well, and I have a feeling, I think we're seeing it now, and I think there'll be even more of it in the future, where we talk a lot about how you get people into the office and how much of a benefit that is. How do you approach that right now? You're a CIO in this modern age where a whole lot of the staff, especially in the last few years, may have very likely came on as remote. And that actually changes kind of the warp and woof of your CIO leadership style and all that. So tell us about where you spend your time and effort and how much that balance between remote and in office, how you're managing all of that.
Yeah, it's definitely been a challenge because I'm highly extroverted and I am a walk around type of a leader. So I got a ton of energy and hopefully built meaningful connections with my team when we were in the office just due to the walk around, right?
Yeah.
So making that shift has been a challenge, and I think quite honestly, we're still figuring it out. But what I have shifted is just more time, right? So more time with listening and communication to the team. So where I would have had the luxury of seeing folks in the office, I'm creating roundtables. I'm doing small group connections. I'm doing skip level meetings. I'm trying to create moments where we have an opportunity to have a dialogue, either one-on-one or in small groups. And then we're really trying to be purposeful because we have multiple remote locations, is to find maybe every other month going to those locations and bringing everyone together.
Right.
And whether that's events where we do things together, innovations, collaboration. We've heard loud and clear that people just don't want to come to the office and sit on Teams meetings.
Yeah.
Want to have a purpose if we're going to come in and build those meaningful connections and innovate and collaborate. So there's definitely value to that. I just think about new entrants into the workforce and how strange that must be, right? And how much I learned just from the relationships and shadowing and different things.
Yeah.
So we're trying to recreate those environments, especially for our new entrants and folks that are Carhartt.
I've heard that same sort of concern from a number of CIOs. I remember talking with the CIO at Gulfstream Aerospace, and she was saying that she often tries to counsel the younger members on the team to try and spend more time in the office, especially if they're ambitious and looking to kind of move up the ladder into other IT management or director type positions. It's one thing if you're a heads down techie, but even then, I think even the most introverted, this is an extrovert who is to another extrovert interpreting what introverts want. So I got to assume I'm going to be about 90% wrong here. But I feel like that energy exchange that happens when everybody's in the same room and around a table and that sort of thing is different now, and I think we're going to have to head back to at least some of it in the future.
Agree.
But it's kind of hard. Well, you would agree. You're another extrovert.
Yeah. Well, and I find myself, it started as 1 week a month, and now I'm in a couple days every week, and so I'm just finding that I'm gravitating towards that, and it depends on the role, right? If you're a dev and you're sitting, cranking out code, it's different than if you're a business analyst and you're working with
Yep.
Your product line, product owners and things like that. So it's a little bit role specific as well, but I'm with you. I think we have to find the balance.
Yes, exactly. And I don't think we have it yet. And I think I think there'll be a lot of conversations about it in the next couple of years, especially. And I think it's especially valuable for younger workers that have never had that in-office experience. They may have read so many bad things about it, about office politics and all that. But if you don't learn to deal with that at some point, you just you sort of stay in place in your career, and hardly anybody wants to do that, right?
That's right.
I want to pivot over entirely and talk about some technology stuff that we had discussed. Because this surprised me that you have a lot of efforts that are building up in RFID. And I thought RFID, I thought in supply chain and retail and tagging and all that stuff, I thought that was old hat. And it turns out not so much. So tell us about what Carhartt is doing in RFID and why it's important now.
Right. So I would say the technology of RFID, to your point, has been around a long time. And I think depending on your industry and, your external parties, you may or may not have, been mandated to bring that technology into the space. So we had just kind of, we hadn't had many folks asking for compliance, but the good news is, and what we're doing to kind of tie this to emerging technology, is taking this opportunity and time to create digital twins of our products, individual products. So not only just saying, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and be compliant for RFID because our wholesale retailer is asking us to. We're taking this opportunity to take several use cases and business strategies and be able to enable them. So for example, we have 3D images and assets of all of our products. We are working towards having serialization of every individual product so that we can create almost like an event management. So you can trace the product from all the way from the field to the end consumer. Yeah. So and then of course there's just a lot of regulation, as you can imagine, and customs compliance that helps, that traceability helps. So what we're really trying to do is take, the opportunity to finally get something that has been in the market for a long time, but play it forward and be a little bit more innovative related to, creating those digital twins and solving more additional business opportunities alongside of that project.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about this story around RFID is that you probably could have done a minimal amount of things that would have, would have satisfied the business, but you essentially came back to them and said, let's think bigger and longer term. Let's consider compliance issues, that sort of thing. So good for you. Apparently that was very well received, right? And while we're talking about technology and all the changes, you have a particularly, I don't want to call it a project because it's probably more of an initiative, establishing a transformation office. And I've heard the big T word, the Tyrannus Rex word about transformation used with a lot of things. Usually the word digital's in front of it or that sort of thing. But you're going to actually create a transformation office. Is that like an office of the CIO? What are you thinking around that? And what is that? And what will it be? And I know you're in the early stages of this, so I'm going to go ahead and put you right out on a limb on this. And tell us what you're thinking and why you need this. And it's not just an IT. This is something you have taken on, but this is for the company as a whole, if I understand that correctly.
That is correct. And to your point, I'll use my disclaimer, subject to change. But the intent, of course, was, to be able to create at an enterprise level our ability to really prioritize the right work, to enable the strategy, to manage change across the organization, to drive outputs and outcomes for the business, and really get process and rigor around it. We've had several iterations over the years where we might have created business cases but not hindsighted, or so we've kind of been half in and out. So this really gives us the opportunity and at this point to be able to say, okay, let's get a process in place with governance around it and make it a repeatable process, also to provide communication and transparency to the business as to what we're investing in, how we're making those decisions, and really be able to elevate the program as a whole, to make sure we're delivering at the end of the day. So, I have, again, the privilege of, because we've had so many large scale digital projects, and we're able to show our capabilities and our ability to connect the dots and kind of see ahead, if you will, related to anticipating the next need. I've been given the opportunity to set this up at the enterprise level, and give it a go.
Yes, I know. Well, and the discussions around this were originally with the VP of Strategy, who owned all of this, corporate initiatives, enterprise PMO, whatever you want to call it. And that individual has now moved on from the company. And
correct,
you're the new VP of Strategy in stepping into that role, essentially. Was that something, did you step up for it and say, give this to me, I think I can get this done? Or was this your chief operating officer who said, I know who can take this on?
Yeah. So just a point of clarification. So we had a VP of Strategy that also did, corporate initiatives or enterprise PMO. So she did ask me to take on, the transformation piece. So the VP of Strategy is still kind of a question mark, but 100% of the components that need to be there are the portfolio management, obviously, the change management component, organizational change management, which is going to be led by our HR team.
Great.
And then, of course, the strategy. So there is a three-pronged approach. And of course, I am going to be working with those partners to make sure that we have the right portfolio for the organization.
Excellent. Well, I love the sound of that. I remember some years ago, one of the CIOs here in the Boston area had his next step after CIO was Chief Strategy Officer. And so that's not a bad path forward for CIOs. Not that you don't have enough to do now in your first year and a half in the job, right? Yeah. Let me see. There was, what was the other thing? Oh, I wanted to ask you about at the changing priorities with the C-suite and the board. Are there anything we haven't really touched on yet that is very important to Carhartt in business transformation, other strategic issues? And I'm thinking along like the environmental, societal, the ESG area, diversity and inclusion efforts, sustainability. What's happening in that area?
Yes.
Give us the whole novel worth of efforts and just a few great comments here. And how do you as the CIO play into those?
Yeah, so we have definitely, in our foundational element of strategy, started to put more focus and energy around exactly what you said: diversity, equity, and inclusion, our sustainability and circularity, and finally community, and making sure that we're showing up in communities. So how IT engages in that in various ways, of course. So on the circularity and sustainability side, for example, we've had energy management solutions that help us benchmark our overall usage there. We're looking at different ways to provide different materials which cause, and traceability. So, there's an element there of just making sure that we can tell the story. On the diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really about the people data, right? So being able to help report and analyze the trends within our workforce to see if we're working towards the goals overall that we're setting there. And then on the community side, we're just being a part of it, right? Volunteering and having the opportunities to be closer to community. There haven't been any IT asks there yet, but that's subject to change, as you know. There's always a digital element to everything
I know.
we do.
There really is. And when it's not a digital element, it's at least a technology element. So,
correct.
But I see a lot of those posts on LinkedIn, on your feed, because I follow you on LinkedIn, of course, and there's just numerous of them. that all that sort of thing is turning up. And I also noticed, I think we talked about half of the senior executive team at Carhartt just happens to be women. Your COO, your CFO, the CIO, the head of HR. It's nice. It's one thing to talk about doing a good job of diversity and inclusion. It's another one to be able to show it too.
Yes.
So do you, and you must, when you're talking to new candidates that are coming into IT, especially in younger generation, they're probably looking, pretty sharply at that. Yes.
Absolutely. And we get a lot of feedback from our associates that they want to see themselves in leadership and, make sure that it is representative of how we show up as a brand. So it's very important.
Yes. Okay. Final wrap-up question for us here. I'm almost relieved to see that our audience questions have stopped coming in. We've had a really great response from the audience. But I have a question about your own leadership style and how it has changed. What you have learned in the last 2 years as you've moved up from this wonderful long history with the company, and then essentially getting singled out so you were part of the succession plan of the previous CIO, and here you are now in the job. So what have you learned about, or maybe had to change about, your leadership style as you became the CIO?
Yes, so it's definitely different. I had gone from directing the work to being more of an enabler for the team, right? So I spend most of my time listening, not talking. I try to clear blockers and really provide cover for my team. I spend a lot of time, quote unquote, marketing for IT, right? And making sure that we are celebrating and telling the stories of all the value that we're driving for the organization. Good. And one thing that I don't love that came with the title is just the request, and not you, Maryfran, of course, but just everyone wants to, for us to grow our brand and be, be the Katrina out there as a CIO. I'm not a big showy person, and I'm not a huge fan of me on camera. So that's one thing I've learned that I don't like.
Well, I hope
I do see it as a necessary evil.
Well, and I hope when you go back and watch some of this today, you will say to yourself, it's time I got over that. I actually do just great on camera, Well, thank you for that. No, really. And it's something a lot of editorial people in my field in publishing are much more behind the scenes. And then sometimes some of us discovered that we liked having a microphone in our hand as much as asking all the questions. And I think that's something that you might want to just leave at the train station. I think you do a very good job of that. And it's been great having you here today to do this. So thank you. Thank you for coming on, for sharing so much about the brand and about what you're doing. I'm sure that anyone who's been following us on LinkedIn and on YouTube, if they haven't already linked in to you so they can follow you on LinkedIn, they absolutely should. Oh, the last thing I forgot to ask you about the women's line you're developing, because I'm a big-time gardener, and I've been wanting specific gardening clothes that I want Carhartt to make now. But you do have, other than my needs, you have strategies going on that you have been very involved in as well from the technology standpoint. So what do we want to say about that as we wrap up?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Maryfran. It completely escaped me. So
me too.
We have gotten renewed focus and energy around our women's line. We've had several times over the 135 years of Carhartt, where we've tried to introduce women's lines that really just were extensions of a lot of the men's product, but we've gotten very focused, built strategies and staffing around spinning up a women's line that is much more catered to the needs of our women consumers. So you'll see different fits, different fabrics, different functions. So it's super exciting. And I've already put a plug in, Maryfran, for you on the gardening side. But we're super excited, and hopefully everyone will get an opportunity to take a look at our new women's line. I encourage you to check it out on Carhartt.com.
That's great. And I'm sure we all will. Thank you so much, Katrina. This has really been fun today. And didn't I tell you the hour would fly by? I get, whew.
Just like that.
I know. I go, here we are, all done. Well, thanks again. It was great having you here. Now,
thank you so much. My pleasure.
And if you joined us late today, do not despair. You can watch the full episode and my entire interview with Katrina Agusti of Carhartt here on LinkedIn and also on CIO.com later in the day and on CIO's YouTube channel. CIO Leadership Live is available also as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. And I feel reasonably confident that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did today with CIO Katrina Agusti of Carhartt. We'll be back again in 2 weeks with another show on Wednesday, September 27th at noon Eastern as well, when I will have CIO Shannon Gath of Teledyne here. And I hope you'll tune in for that show as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks especially to all of our alert audience members who sent in such great questions. Do take a moment to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, CIO on YouTube, because you can actually find all of the 100 plus episodes of CIO Leadership Live on there. I've been encouraging people to binge their way through all the Leadership Live interviews, but I don't know if anyone has done that and lived to tell the tale. Think of all those, more than 100 hours of CIOs talking about strategy, leadership, and innovation. Anyway, take care out there, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again here next time.